Hi, it's Mayor Walter Sendzik from the City of St. Catharines, and I want to welcome you to our year-end show. This is the final show of 2017. We've had a wonderful year here in the City of St. Catharines. Our Home with Mayor Sendzik is about exploring our community. It's about talking to people in our community who are difference makers, who are on the leading edge of their business or their community organization, who are just doing amazing work. And it's hard to reflect back on a year and look at what were the positives, what were some of the challenges we faced. But as mayor, I have the great opportunity of being a part of council who are making decisions that have an impact on the community and also working with our MPs and MPPs. And so there's a lot of great things that have happened. The reopening of Lakeside Park, the brand new pavilion, the Rotary band shell, looking at investments that are taking place in our community, from the first affordable housing project that's being built in our city since 1977 taking place on Carlton Street. We have new businesses opening up in our community. There's just a vibrancy that you see. There's an energy that we experience, and council's working really hard to be a part of that and make sure that we're making decisions that aren't just about what's good for our community in the next 4 years, but what's good for our community for the next 50 years. And so we have a strategic plan that we're following, and every year we're able to go through and check off a few more pieces of that strategic plan. And so today we have two individuals who have been covering the city. So this is the show that we get to interact with our local media. And joining us today we have Melinda Cheevers from Niagara This Week, and we have Karina Walter from the St. Catharines Standard, both of whom are very familiar to those who follow local media. And I hope there's a lot of you out there, because there has been transitions in our local media that we've heard about. As a former publisher of a magazine, I have a strong identity with publishing, and really having strong local media news coverage is an integral part of making sure that our governments are being held accountable, but also our government agencies and organizations, and telling the good news stories, but also making sure that people are being held to account, so that when we're making decisions, no matter what order of government you're a part of, when we're making decisions, we're making them in an open way and a transparent way, and that we're open to critical thinking. And so both Melinda and Karina have been a part of St. Catharines City Council as reporters for the better part of a number of years, and I'll get to the backgrounds. But they play an integral role for us, for you as a community, to ensure that you have that knowledge that is often lacking when we don't have a focused local media lens on a lot of the work that we are doing here. And I know as mayor, I value and I thank the coverage that you provide. And Melinda is an award-winning reporter for Niagara This Week, covering her hometown of St. Catharines. She's also the editor of Niagara Life and West Niagara Life magazines, of which I'm a big magazine guy, so I appreciate the work that goes into putting a magazine together. It's never easy, but you do an amazing job. Melinda is an ardent feminist. She volunteers her time to help community initiatives with a focus on women, including the YWCA, Niagara's current capital campaign, which is off to a roaring start, and the annual Niagara Leadership Summit for Women. She's also a founding director of the Canadian Charity Adventurers, an organization that has raised more than $40,000 for Make-A-Wish Canada. So, first of all, welcome to the show. First time on?
It is my first time on.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Great to have you here. And sitting beside Melinda, we have Karina Walter, who is originally from London, Ontario, graduate of Western University in history and journalism, but has been part of our community since 1999. And she's been with the Standard since 1999. She started out as a police reporter, moved over to the courts, and now she's been covering the city for a number of years. And for those who have an online presence, you may also recognize Karina from her Ask Sendzik, where I get to be interviewed by Karina. So the tables are turned here, as the chat with the mayor is now, you are chatting with the mayor, but you're on Our Home with Mayor Sendzik instead of Ask Sendzik. So I'm going to be asking the questions, but welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little weird sitting on this side of the couch.
It is. And I haven't really shared any questions with you, so these are all going to be first time heard, which is great. Put you on the spot a little bit more, put you under the spotlight, as they say. But we're just here to have a a good conversation, because I think from your vantage point, you see things differently than I do. As a mayor and council, we're cheerleaders for the community. We're ambassadors for the community. I believe it's important that we talk positively about what's going on in our community. But the role of media, if it's performed correctly, is not necessarily to always be a cheerleader for a community. So I just want to talk about some of the challenges as reporters that you've seen in our community. We're going to go challenges, and we're going to talk about some of the positive things and what we see moving forward. So Melinda, what are some of the challenges as a reporter that you've sat through many council meetings and you've looked at and said, okay, from a critical perspective, what's something that jumps out at you?
I think one thing that jumps out, especially at this time of year, was the recent discussion regarding the what to do with the $4 million hydro surplus. And when Councillor Cisco brought forward the idea of setting up an affordable housing initiative and tackling that within our community, I think that's something that needs to be robustly discussed and addressed. Especially, like I mentioned, at this time of year, you're seeing the shelters filling up and you're seeing people in need of housing. And every time you talk to any of the directors of the shelters, they're saying that there's a lot of people that they're seeing for the first time.
Yeah.
People that hadn't come out before,
yeah.
And those people are in need of something. So,
right.
So that really stuck with me, I think.
And you're on the front lines of that, both as a reporter and also as someone who's involved with the YW. And we have our housing action plan that council has approved, and that was part of our looking at how to be a part of some of the solutions that go along with affordable housing, and making sure that as a council we're making those decisions. And it's interesting because I support the hydro surplus portion going to affordable housing. And it was interesting how, as a council, we weren't unanimous in that. There's some councillors who say, well, it's not our problem. That's a regional issue, or that's a provincial issue. And the reality is, from your perspective, it's a community issue.
Right.
You know, it's not one level of government. So, affordable housing, and that's a big one. I'm hearing more and more about it.
Yeah.
And Karina, over to you. What was one or two highlights that you look at and go, okay, there's some choppy waters ahead?
Yeah, well, I think definitely with the poverty issues and affordable housing as well, I think we've seen some movement on that this year. But in terms of some other things, we have some large pieces of property in the city that still have to be developed on Queenston Street, on Ontario Street. People want to see something happen in Port Dalhousie, so I think that whether we see something happening there or not this year, I think a lot of people would like to definitely see some movement on that.
And it's interesting because you touched on poverty, and that does seem to be, from my perspective, where some of the choppy waters ahead of us, where we need to create a sustainable, vibrant economy. We need to make sure that people are, the jobs are there for the people with the skills that are part of that vibrant economy. Getting those properties back online creates jobs, creates opportunities for people to have affordable housing. But there's the complexities there. And I guess you have a front row seat to it. So in terms of what are some of the surprises, and give the public an idea of what it's like to be sitting through council, because quite honestly, on many nights it's just you two and council. And so you're there as that viewpoint into how we as a council operate. So, you know, what are some of the surprises that maybe the public doesn't see on a regular basis because, you know, they're not tuning into your TV kind of thing?
Well, I think council seems to be working really well together the last 2 years. It was kind of a rocky start, I think. There were a lot of divisions on council. I think we're seeing them working together a little bit more. I mean, everybody has their own opinions.
Right.
Not everybody is going to vote together on the same thing. But you definitely have sort of more common goals, I think, and people working together more that way.
Good.
That's one of the things.
Okay.
Prior to reporting in St. Catharines, I covered Niagara-on-the-Lake for 6 years, and their council isn't based on a ward system. So this is my first time really covering a ward system council, and I think that sometimes that strikes me. I notice the difference because what seems like a good initiative to support for the community as a whole, you sometimes end up with whataboutism. Like, what about my ward?
Whataboutism? I got it right. Whataboutism. I love that. Okay, great. Keep going.
What about Meriton? Or what about Port Dalhousie?
Yeah.
I don't want to single any ward out.
No.
You end up with that sometimes. So.
And I think that's a frustration as a mayor who represents the entire city that you get frustrated with the whataboutisms. And, you know, where's the best place for a splash pad? And based on staff recommendation X, and then it becomes, well, what about my ward? I want one in my ward. Well, it doesn't make sense because you already have a pool or you're right by the lake. Like there's geographically, like, and I guess that's where I see that frustration, and it's interesting that even as a media reporter, you look at it and go, yeah, there's a frustration here for where that is. And so what are some of the, every other Monday night you're sitting there, what else would you say if you know you were at a party and someone said, oh, you cover city council, what's that like?
I am a bit of a nerd, so I do like getting a first-hand view. Yeah. And now that I own a house, I'm a taxpayer. So and in St. Catharines, it's my first time covering the community that I live in.
Okay.
So I enjoy, you know, hearing why things are happening. I use the aquatic center in St. Catharines. So when the hours changed and my class got cut, I knew why, because it was a tough budget year. Okay. So it helps me understand the impacts that it's having on my life. So I enjoy it. So when we talk about it at parties, they mostly just laugh at me because I'm a nerd.
Interesting. Okay. I would say you're informed, not a nerd. You're informed.
You do get an insider's view for sure, and you get to know where kind of people stand on different things and exactly why things are happening the way they are and where your dollars are going, which is always good to know.
So as we head into the break, one of the highlights is budget time. It's always, you know, that seems to be the focus point for a lot. Being on council or being a reporter of council, do you have a better appreciation of the financial side of the equation and where we are?
Yeah, like again, I think it makes me appreciate being able to watch it play out and knowing that the Standing Budget Committee has been working on it for a whole year and that there's been different presentations. It makes you appreciate a little bit more the work that goes behind making those decisions. And it's hard sometimes when you're sitting at the council table because you might not always, like at the press table, you might not always agree with some of the cuts that are happening, and I always want to like put my hand up, but that part is hard sometimes, but otherwise it's
I can imagine
interesting.
that. I can imagine that.
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned the $4 million question that council has, they've got $4 million from the Chacluna project that you're going to be able to spend in the new year. I think you really do see all the different projects that require money across the city, right, and all the different, and that's does make you appreciate that a little bit more as well, just how much need there is in so many different areas. Whether, I mean, we were talking about affordable housing, but you know, infrastructure and programs and all of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. All right, so when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about some of the positives that we're looking at as a community, and also I think the changes on social media and how you're approaching the coverage of the city from a different perspective that people may not be aware of. So please stay tuned because we've got more information about the year in review here in St. Catharines. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Our Home with Mayor Sendzik, where we're talking about the year in review. I can't believe a year's already gone by. 2017 is set to close. We're going to be ushering in 2018. But what a year it was here at the City of St. Catharines. And we're fortunate to have on the show Melinda Cheevers and Karina Walter, both of whom have a bird's eye view into what goes on at the city and city council. Their coverage through the Standard and Niagara this week on a bi-weekly basis in terms of council happenings, but also what's happening in the community. They get to see on the front row of what's happening, and it's an important part of our community, making sure we have local media. So I'm going to start, Karina, in terms of some of the positive stories that you saw. So we were talking about some of the challenges that you see. What were some of the positives that you saw come out of the city? It doesn't have to be about city council even.
I think the unveiling of the Welland Canal Fallen Workers Memorial just in November was very significant. It's honoring the 137 men who were killed while building the canal, and it was kind of a memorial that was more than 80 years in the making, and the federal government was going to build it back in the 30s, or they said they would be building it, and it just never happened. Nobody really knows why. And the fact that it's here now at the St. Catharines Museum was really, I think, a grassroots effort that was made by the community, by the city, by the paper, to get it up. And you know, it started with the local historians who had researched the Welland Canal. They came to my colleague Grant LaFleche, Arden Fair did, hoping to kind of bring the stories forward. And Grant did a lot of research, talked to a lot of descendants of some of the men who died. Some of these men died in terrible ways, just horrible ways. And he researched that, and then the city put together a task force made up of community members and labor people, and now we have this wonderful memorial. And it's beautiful driving down Welland Canal Parkway at night and seeing it all lit up.
It is, and I think that was when someone asked me over the past 3 years as being mayor, what would you consider to be one of those moments where you're like, yes, this is what it's like to be a mayor? And that day, that unveiling was a moment. And it's probably one that will rank up there in the top 5 of achievements as a council and as a community. And it was so well done, so well thought out. And I think as a memorial, it will last the test of time. Mm-hmm. And I think over the years, people will continue to be attracted to it. It's beautifully done, and you're right, it started at the grassroots, and I think that's where a lot of the strength of that memorial came from, is that it wasn't driven from top down by government saying thou shalt. It was, hey, this is a promise that was unfulfilled, let's get it done. And a lot of people did some heavy lifting on that, so that was a great one. Melinda.
I think that some of the large-scale events that have happened in the downtown core over the last year kind of reiterated the reasoning behind, or I guess all of the promises mm-hmm. that were put behind the revitalization of the downtown. Right. So we had the Scotties in February, and you really saw the community kind of just brighten up over it. Downtown was abuzz with people that came from all over. I ran into a man from Saskatchewan who had painted his beard with the City of St. Catharines logo. I
know, which was cool.
And he said that he travels all over following the Scotties. So it was neat to have that kind of buzz come to the city. Then we had the Celebration of Nations at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, which was a unique, one-of-a-kind event. And it was great to see the large response that it got from the public come out to that too, and make great use of the full space. So the Man Raceway Park, behind. And then also then last month we had Sir Elton John come to town as well, which was something that you couldn't really imagine happening in St. Catharines before we had a space like the Meridian Centre.
I don't think anyone would imagine Sir Elton John would ever be playing the piano in downtown St. Catharines. If you told someone that 10 years ago, they would have laughed at you. Mm-hmm. And now we have a space that allows that to happen. And I think the success of the Performing Arts Centre, how the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, 362 days of activity last year, the amount of people that have gone through that centre alone, combined with the Meridian Centre and the Ice Dogs and the Scotties and the River Lines, it really shows again how if you plan right, you can generate a lot of opportunity. And I think one of the interesting things that comes off of that success is the new businesses that have opened up in the area. Mm-hmm. And they're in the downtown core, and there's a lot of new businesses that have put out shingles and said we're open, and we've got more coming. 2018 is going to be a great year for more announcements in downtown St. Catharines, and they're going to be anchored by very recognized brands looking at St. Catharines as, okay, is this a market for us? And they're starting to nod and say, yes, it is. So I agree. I think that's a barometer of our success. And where some of our challenges may have been previously, we've now turned the corner and we've got a ton of momentum. And I think that's a great opportunity. And so one of the other areas that we were challenged by, and I think you both covered it very well in the media, was the high water levels of Lake Ontario and how it had an impact on Port Dalhousie. So from your perspective, is and I want to get a bit into climate change. Do you see that as something that's going to become more frequent? And the reason why I'm asking in terms of your coverage is natural events may become a new norm. So who wants to chime in on that one? High water until August, that was unheard of.
Yeah. It was the highest levels in 100 years, at least since they started recording.
Since they started recording. That's exactly it.
Well, we hope it doesn't continue to happen, but it might. And it definitely caused a lot of havoc down there over the summer months. I mean, the carousel couldn't open it when it was supposed to. The Lions didn't hold their carnival, which was unheard of. They did set off the fireworks, but they had to do it from a different place. And the city had this new park that they wanted to unveil, and that was all put off because of the water levels as well. And I don't know if we still know what the damage is to the beach at this point, how much it's going to cost to actually
so that'll
fix
be a forthcoming report on that one as well. So there was some shoreline damage along the way. And I think from a coverage point of view, and I want to pivot here in terms of social media. So you're both involved on social media. Belinda, I don't know how you type up 140 characters as fast as you do, but you seem to be able to cover quickly. And Karina, the multimedia approach that you bring to covering council and the extension of the stories. How has social media changed? And as we head into this, what's your handle? What's your Twitter handle?
NTW Melinda.
NTW Melinda?
Karena_Standard.
Okay, so and I say that because folks, one way to keep in touch with what's going on council night, and if you don't have your TV, you can follow on Twitter, and they do a good job of talking about the highlights that are coming up. So how has that changed in your reporting over your career?
Well, when I first started, Twitter wasn't really a thing. So it's definitely introduced, it's made it more challenging, I find, sometimes. It is helpful. Like now, if there's a fire breaking or a big accident, you can go on Twitter and see what people are saying, find out the surrounding area, and hear some of the people's response. But in terms of covering, it does change what we do. We take a photo for the paper, take a photo for Twitter, get comments on Twitter. You get immediate feedback. So when I'm in council and I'm covering stuff, I often do tweet along to council, and there is a contingent of people that follow along at home, and they're watching it on your TV or live streaming on the city's website, and they're commenting in real time to us about what's happening or what their concerns are. For instance, last Monday there was the discussion about about Lowell Avenue and the road reconstruction, and residents were chiming in saying it needs to happen. Yeah,
that was a great example of real time. And Karina, from your perspective, how has it changed the coverage, and your readers are different readers now? You have your core traditional newsprint broad sheets, but now you've also got readers that are 140 characters that are following you along.
I think it's just a different way to deliver the news. It hasn't necessarily changed the way that I'm approaching it, but it's a different way to get at new readers. Like you said, there is more interaction with people, but it is just a different way to share your stories on Facebook and Twitter and through videos and things like that. So there is definitely more interaction. People ask us questions that we will sometimes pass on and ask, because people come up with great questions too sometimes that maybe I'm not thinking about. But the actual stories themselves, I think we're still going into them in the same way that I would otherwise.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at how a story is constructed, and for those who follow the news media in terms of newspapers, you've got a certain number of paragraphs, certain number of lines that you create, but in Twitter, it's really you're putting the facts down. And I mean, it's the bare facts. It's this councillor says this now. You can't really inject anything into that. And do you next morning go through your Twitter feed and okay, I'm going to pull this story out and I'm going to do a bigger story on that? Do you find yourself doing that?
Yeah, sometimes it helps you go back and read it. We have a tight turnaround. You're going to laugh because this is you every day, but we cover council on Monday night and then we lay out our paper on Tuesday morning. So it's a tight turnaround for us. But and it does help you go back and look through it and see what sticks out that I might not remember from the night before, which is helpful.
Interesting, interesting. So, looking ahead, we've got a few more minutes, and we can look ahead to 2018. So, as two media reporters who are on the beat in the community, what do you see heading into 2018, Karina?
I think 2018 is going to be all about the elections. There's a provincial election and a municipal election.
Really?
Yeah, you might want to.
Huh. Okay.
I think the municipal election will be interesting this year because we have a new position for people to vote on, which is an elected chair, regional chair, which we haven't had before. For viewers who don't know, usually St. Catharines residents would vote for 6 regional councillors, and then they, along with their peers, vote for a regional chair. So it'll be interesting to see how an elected position works, how that person can get their name across an entire region. Yeah. It's going to be a huge undertaking, and it's going to cost a lot of money.
Melinda?
Yeah, I think ditto. There's been a lot of speculation about how the regional chair election is going to play out and how much people are going to have to spend in order to run for it. I think it'll be interesting to see what actually ends up happening and how that ends up playing out.
So that'll be next October. Mm-hmm. And from the business side of the equation, your owners are going to be very happy with the amount of spending that's going to have to take place for. Every 4 years, you get a bit of a bump when it comes to advertising, local media. This year, you get a double bump because you got the provincial election coming up in June, and then you have the municipal. And I would say that what we're looking at is, I think the Union waterfront decision will be coming up in early in 2018. You have 2 other developments taking place in Port Dalhousie that will be coming up for consideration. We'll be hopefully hearing more news about the Ontario Street former GM property, and we're looking forward to having an announcement on the Queenston Street in terms of the design of what they're looking to build there. So there's, from an infrastructure point of view, you're going to see some hopefully great announcements. And then just overall, yeah, we're heading into an election, but I think it's a year that we can celebrate. It's 2018, I think, is shaping up to be a year that we can justifiably look back and say a lot has been done. More needs to get done, but we got to get a handle on affordable housing. We got to get a handle on poverty in our community. Compassionate city building needs to be a first and foremost at the forefront of what we do. So there's a lot of stuff we're working on, but I want to end with saying thank you for the coverage that you bring to our community. We're very fortunate to have you as media reporters in St. Catharines covering our community. Without you, there'd be a big hole that would be very difficult to fill. So I wish you all the best in 2018. To the viewers at home, I hope you've had a wonderful 2017 and a beautiful holiday season. And I want to wish you all the best for 2018. We do have an amazing city here in St. Catharines. And from my family to yours, have a wonderful 2018 and Happy New Year. Take care.